At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
And I am Anthony Sie. A pleasant welcome to Focus on Liberia. Thank you for joining the broadcast. At Focus on Liberia, we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We have a breaking news here for you today. And so do me a favor by sharing the broadcast with your contacts. Again, we have a breaking news, and I'm here to break that news for you. This is interesting. It is a very good news in my judgment, but I have my own skepticism, but it is a breaking news indeed. And so let us together do one thing here. As I break this news here in no time to you. So we are looking at breaking news, war crimes, courts. Hold on, let me take a little break yet, and I will be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
And I am answering CA. I can welcome you. Let's get to the breaking news right away. This news is hot and it is breaking, and I'm here to break the news for you. Breaking news: War Crimes Court establishment document leak. And we have all the volume of documents in our possession here. And there are very, very interesting information in these documents that we have in our possession. All the steps and all the documentation, all the ingredients as to how the war crimes court being pursued by advocates and the government of Liberia will be set up. We all have it here, and we want to lay it out on you. And if you are a Liberian citizen, whether you are anxious for the establishment of the War Crimes Court, or if you feel that it's a waste of time, it's not going to happen, one thing I want to agree you also want to know is what is in this War Crimes Court. How will the whole thing be established? You know, we have, what would be the jurisdiction? Would there be appeals? Will, alleged perpetrators have the opportunity to appeal the issue of jurisdiction? What kind of instrument will be used? All of the information we have in our possession, and we want to lay it on you in no time. And so, folks, please do me a favor and share the broadcast with someone in your contact. So, along lines, we all have been talking about the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court, and we have documentation that detail the steps from step 1 to the point where the code will be established and how the code will be operational. All of the processes and procedures, the different branches of the court, we have the information here leaked to us, and we are breaking the news for you to get an understanding of what the code going to be, for you to get a semblance, an understanding of the steps leading to the establishment of the court, and also how the court will be operational. Isn't that something interesting to break to you right now? I think you will agree it is very important information that you will want to know. And so, folks, many people have been advocating for the War and Economic Crimes Court. There are War Crime Court advocacy institutions, and there are individual political actors who have been advocating for this. The United Party, to a credit, during the campaign, there was some leaked information from some executive chat room in which they said that, look, should we win the election, we will bring the War and Economic Crimes Court. And some of them even mentioned Prince Johnson, that we will bring the War Crimes Court and we don't care if Prince Johnson is supporting us. And so that Unity Party, through its leader, Joseph Yeman Walker, continued to maintain his commitment to establishing the War Crimes Court. If you ask me as an individual, I am on a wait and see basis right now. I'm in a wait and see mode. For I don't trust our leaders. But some commitment has been shown here by the president, Joseph Yeman Walker. So the documentation we have in our possession, the documentation is from a group, and the name of the group is International Justice Group. Their group is headed by Councillor Jerome Vaudhier. Councillor Jerome Vaudhier is the former commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC. His group has detailed the steps to establishing the War Crimes Court. His group, I'm sure his group is in partnership with other institutions and individuals, and they project that they also in conversation with some international group, donor partners, and all of that, working on this particular process to establishing the War and Economic Crimes Code. And the detail from step 1 to the operational stage of the code. They first send a communication to the president, and the communication was also addressed to the vice president, Jeremiah Kuhn. So again, let me state for the records, they send a communication to the president, and this communication is asking for what? The communication is seeking the issuing of an executive order to do what? To establish an office that will initiate and spearhead the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court. They are seeking for an executive order from the president that will establish an office for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court. They believe that will be the first step. And it is that office now that will work with the Liberian government, that will work with the legislature, that will work with the United Nations, that will work with ECOWAS, that will work with AU, and other countries who have interest, as well as institutions who have interest in establishing the War and Economic Crimes Court. So that letter was sent to the president. The letter was also addressed to the speaker, Franti Kofa. The letter was also addressed to the vice president. They also addressed the letter to Nyomli Kanga Lawrence, who is Senator Nyomli Kanga Lawrence, who is the pro tem. These individuals receive a copy each of this communication, seeking an executive order to establish the office for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court. Now, so the leaked information here is that we can assume that there will be an executive order from the president to establish the office that will be responsible for establishing the War and Economic Crimes Court. So if all things hold constant, more than likely we will see that executive order coming from the president, because those who are seeking the president's blessing and who have his ears as to the steps to establishing the codes are trying to impress on the president here that Mr. President, and not only Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, Mana Pro Tem, here is the first step, an executive order establishing the office for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court. If the president yields to this suggestion from this group and its partners seeking the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court, it is obvious that executive order may be coming. We don't know, but that is the information that we have in our possession. So we have a copy of that communication in our possession. And what other thing can we report? This letter to the president, the vice president, the pro tem, and the speaker seeking, and not only the pro tem, the vice president, the president, and the speaker. This letter is also addressed to the justice minister. That's its Honorable Oswald N. Tuer, who is now the Attorney General of the Republic of Liberia, or Justice Minister of the Republic of Liberia. So 5 persons receive this communication. And what will the office for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Code do? What will it be responsible for? Part of the letter reads, Your Excellency, to kindly issue an executive order establishing the office of the War and Economic Crimes Code with the following short-term mandates. So they are seeking also that the office of the War and Economic Crimes Court that should be established through an executive order must have some responsibilities. Number one, to coordinate all efforts towards establishing the War and Economic Crimes Court. So that office, when established, will coordinate all of the efforts leading to the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court. They also say in their communication that office will serve as liaison between the government of Liberia and the United Nations. That office, number 3, will maintain a formal relationship with the United Nations and the larger international community in respect to fundraising initiatives in favor of the court. So they will be the liaison between the government of Liberia, the United Nations, and the entire international community in raising funds, finding the money to fund the initiative. Number 4, the office will coordinate and mobilize resources, materials, equipment where necessary for the smooth and effective establishment and setting up of the court. Number 5, the office shall work with the Office of the Minister of State for Presidential Affairs, Minister of Justice and Foreign Affairs, and shall be dissolved upon the setting up of the court. So they are also saying to you, once the court is established, this office for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court that they are seeking should be established, that the president, through an executive order, will cease operation. But among other things, it will coordinate all the activities. We work with the international community and Liberian government to raise money, to find all the resources, material, equipment needed. And this letter has been addressed again to the Minister of Justice. It has been addressed to the Speaker, the Pro Tem, the Vice President, and the President of the Republic of Liberia. That is one of the documents that we have in our possession, and I have just detailed and explained to you what they are seeking in that communication, and those things spell out all the steps leading to the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court. Now, another documentation that we have in our possession, which is the big one, is the one that details the law establishing the court, the functions of the court, the structures of the court, and the operational mechanism of the court, how the court will carry on its work, the jurisdiction of the court, the instruments or laws that will be used by the court, how to gather evidence. Everything is being detailed, and I will do my best to present to you and give you a unique and concise semblance of the structure of the court and its powers and operations. So let us get to it. The first thing this document, which is to be law, has done is to repeal parts of our laws, and this particular law now establishing the court will replace it. And so here it is. It reads, an act amending Title 17 of the Revised Code of Laws of Liberia, known as the Judicial Law of 1972, by adding thereto a new chapter to be known as Chapter 26, establishing the Extraordinary Criminal Code for Liberia, otherwise referred to as the War and Economic Crimes Code for Liberia, WAECC. So they are very strategic in how they are proceeding with this effort. They want this to be legal. And by that, they want it to be binding. They want it to be done the right way. And so this law establishing the War and Economic Crimes Court is replacing or is being used to amend Title 17 of the revised Code of Law of Liberia, known as the Judicial Law of 1972. So there is a 1972 law that this law now that will be establishing a War and Economic Crime Code will be replacing. And the name for this new law that will be establishing the War and Economic Crimes Code will be known as Chapter 26, establishing the Extraordinary Court for Liberia, otherwise known as the War and Economic Crimes Court. So having said that, let me explain that this is a law that defines, that structure, that establishes, and that lay out the functions, the chambers, the jurisdiction of what is to be when happens the War and Economic Crimes Court. So now let's look in this document and see what all we can find and explain to give you a unique sense and understanding and a semblance of the court. I know you are imagining now, what kind of court is it going to be? How is it going to be? What will be the structure? What will be the jurisdiction, the powers? Will there be appeal courts and all that? And so let us go into it quickly. So the first thing the law is doing is taking into account what have been agreed upon in the past. And by that, I mean legislative actions that were taken and are bounding on Liberia. So this law is also tapping and trying to enhance what was done legally through an act of the National Legislature. And reads, whereas the TRC of Liberia, what is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Liberia, was commissioned by an act of the Honorable National Legislature. So they are telling you that the law is taking into account what was done legally through the National Legislature. By that meaning, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was created by an act of National Legislature. And that Truth and Reconciliation Commission did its work and made recommendations, and those recommendations needed to be acted upon because that was the entire goal, that it investigates, document, and recommend further steps. And so the law is seizing on that law. And it also went further by saying June 10, 2024 will mark the 20th anniversary of the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission by the then National Legislature. So it's also reminding you that by June 10 this year, it will be 20 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established, and it did its work, and the recommendations have been lying there. So this law now is coming to awaken the desire and the need to implement the recommendation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that remains a law. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report remains a law. All right? So it went further by saying, considering that it has been 12 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report was submitted to the government of Liberia, it is also reminding us that it's been 12 years now since the recommendations were submitted. And up to now, nothing has been done So in order to do something about it, we are creating this law, creating the act, creating the War and Economic Crimes Court. It's been 12 years since the recommendations were set up, and nothing, was submitted to the government of Liberia, and nothing has been done. So this law creating the War and Economic Crimes Court, which is also being referred to as the Extraordinary Criminal Tribunal, Extraordinary Criminal Code for Liberia. This law is seizing on that opportunity to do so. And it went further, whereas successive governments have failed to perform this very important responsibility to implement all recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It furthers, U.S. Congress passed Resolution 1055 demanding the full implementation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations, including the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Code. That is a significant piece. It is also telling you that this law is yet to also ensure that we achieve a resolution that was passed in the U.S. Congress, and that resolution is Resolution 1055. I have full knowledge of this one. The U.S. government, U.S. Congress, has unanimously passed a resolution in 1055. That resolution had called for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Code, for the full implementation of the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This was the U.S. government, through its Congress, that deliberated, debated, evaluated, and decided that the work done by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, its recommendations, needed to be implemented. And to implement that, there needed to be a War and Economic Crimes Court in Liberia or for Liberia, so as the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission will be implemented, so that justice can be served in Liberia, so that individuals responsible or who bear the greatest responsibility for the atrocities, those who prosecuted the war, those who committed heinous crimes, humanitarian crimes, can be held accountable, so that they can also be given the opportunity to clear their names and remove the dark cloud hanging over them since they have been accused. So this law now that is in our possession, that has been laid, detailing the structure of the War and Economic Crimes Code for Liberia, is saying the law is yet to act. The U.S. government acted and passed a law, and that law is binding the U.S. government to ensure that the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission are implemented. The U.S. government made that decision. Now, when a bill is passed in any legislature, especially a serious one like the U.S. government, they fund it. In other words, they put their money behind the law, because a law, when passed, won't be enforced. And you need money to enforce the law. You need structures to enforce the law. And so in the U.S. government resolution 1055, they have called for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court to implement the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So this is by law. And so in the wisdom of those advocating and reaching out to the Bouaka government, the document in our possession is telling us, they are saying there's so much opportunities here for which it has become necessary to go forth with the establishment of the World and Economic Crimes Court. The U.S. government passed a law, and the U.S. government is standing by. And so, the other thing they've done here, which is also very significant, is by naming this court. It must have a name. And the name, according to them, is the Extraordinary Criminal Court of Liberia. And it would be commonly known as the World and Economic Crimes Court. So let us talk about this whole court here. What will be the structures? What will be the organs of the court? According to the documentation in our possession, the court shall be composed of the following organs. Now we are coming to the structure. What kind of court it will be? How will it be set up? What will be the organs of the court? One, they said there will be a trial division. Number two, there will be an appeal division, a division where when one receives a judgment and that one is not certified, can go there and appeal. Also, the office of the prosecutor. And number four, there will be the registry. The registry will be the secretariat that will document everything. Now, you also might want to know the composition of the court. According to the document in our possession, the court shall be composed of 2 chambers and 8 independent full judges who will serve accordingly. The question might come, who then will be the judges? Who will appoint them and where will they come from? According to the documentation that set up this proposed war crimes court, number one, they said the Republic of Liberia must give 1 judge, or meaning that Liberia will designate a judge. Number two, the U.S. government will also designate a judge. Number three, the United Nations will designate a judge. Number four, ECOWAS will designate a judge, and the African Union will designate a judge. So again, they are saying, while it is true that there will be 2 chambers and 8 independent full-time judges who will serve accordingly, they are also telling you how those judges will be decided. And the representation and the composition is what I just said to you. According to them, Republic of Liberia, meaning that the president will be able to appoint a judge, the U.S. government, the United Nations, ECOWAS, and the African Union, and the rest, will reach a decision as to how they come up with the remaining 3 to make it 8. Now, another major thing that you need to know here is the budget of the court. For these things to happen, you need money. According to the documentation, all right, the court shall have its own budget, which shall derive from the government of Liberia and voluntary contribution from donors, partners, states, international institutions, non-governmental organizations, and individuals. So, like in the letter they wrote to the president, they said, well, if the office for the establishment of the War Crime Court is established through an executive order, it will coordinate. It will be the liaison between the Liberian government and the international community in raising the fundings for the implementation of the War and Economic Crimes Court. So now they are yet saying in the document establishing a court, it will have a budget. The court will run its own budget. And when you're talking budget, you're talking money. And when you're talking money in terms of budget, you're talking about sources, where the money will come from. So yeah, they are detailing to us that part of the money must come from the Liberian government. And of course, they are counting on the international community, the United Nations, donor partners, and other donor countries to help fund this process. That is how they're going to raise the money. that will be needed for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court. The other big thing is jurisdiction. According to what we have in our possession, you've been asking the question, so when the court is established, what will be the jurisdiction? You understand? Where will the court be? Will it be in Liberia? Will it be elsewhere in different country? And where will it be? You've been asking that question. They are saying here, according to the document in our possession, Liberia being a signatory to several international treaties and conventions, which have since been ratified by the National Legislature of the Republic of Liberia, including but not limited to war crimes against humanity, international humanitarian law, international human rights laws, statutes, etc., thereby constituting parts of the bodies of laws of Liberia, are incorporated thereon and referenced as part of this legislation, as are applicable to and relevant to the purpose of this act and the comprehensive application, interpretation, enforcement of all provisions herein contained. Beautiful. So what they are saying here is that, look, when you're talking about jurisdiction and the jurisdiction powers, or the instrument, the laws that they will use, or the War Crimes Code will use, they are saying, well, Liberia will be the place where it will happen. And they are giving reason. Why Liberia? Number one, Liberia is a signatory to so many international laws. And our legislature has ratified these laws. And by virtue of our legislature ratifying these laws have become domesticated, meaning that they have formed part of our bodies of laws. And so those laws can be used in Liberia to hold individuals accountable. Hello? That is the argument they are saying. So they are saying some of these laws, where applicable, will be used and will be enforced in order to operate the court in Liberia. And I think that is beautiful. So if you don't understand it again, so we have the Rome Statute, we have laws against human rights, we have international humanitarian laws, we have international human rights laws. So those who committed human rights violations, those who committed crimes against humanity, all of these things, these laws, they were ratified and part of our domestic laws now by virtue of the fact that we ratified these laws. So those laws must be used. Must be used. So you can say, well, Liberia does not have an international humanitarian law, so you can't persecute a person in Liberia. No, you can't say that. But they also said some of these laws might not be applicable because of the time those laws were established, because of what they call the statute of limitation. Or some laws cannot go back. So where a law cannot be applied, that's okay. But where the law will apply, whether it's an international law that was domesticated, it will be used in our code of law. They are also part of our domestic laws now because we domesticated those laws. I think that is brilliant. Now, further, they are talking about violations. So you might want to know, what are the gross violations, what are the crimes, what are the wrongdoings that they will be investigating. They are telling you everything. So, for example, they will be investigating murder, which is killing. They will be investigating extermination, which is also another part of killing, meaning that you're going after a group of people, you want to wipe all of them out. They will be investigating that. So because you want to know what are some of the violations or crimes, they will be investigating. Now, enslavement, some people were enslaved, they believe, or if anything like that was done during the war, that will also be investigated. They're talking about rape will also be investigated. Torture, some people were tortured, and you remember Tabe, when they were tying people, that was or is a form of torture. That will be also investigated. What will also be investigated is what? Sexual slavery. some women were subjected to forcefully comply because those who have the guns wanted to have their way. So people were held against their way to comply to soldiers for their sexual satisfaction against their own will. So sexual slavery will be investigated. Enforced prostitution will be investigated. Sexual violence will also be investigated because some individuals force themselves on some people against their own will. That will also be investigated. They are saying genocide, if it happened, will also be investigated. So they are detailing all of the crimes, that will be, investigated. They will also be investigating deportation. Some people were deported, some people were forced, forced pregnancy. All of these things, will be investigated. They talk about mutilation. Some people were mutilated. They cut their hands. They cut, all of these things, will be investigated. So I'm trying to give you here, a semblance of the violations that will be investigated when the code is established. And that is something that you must know. And they will also be investigating if somebody was sentenced without any due process during the war. That will also be investigated, where you arrested somebody as a soldier, there was no due process, and the person was just thrown behind bars and all that. That will also be investigated. All right. So many things that will be investigated. Now let's get to something else that is also significant here that you need to know, which is jurisdiction over a person 17 years and honor. So where they have jurisdiction on just about any human being, because we talk about jurisdiction. Now, the law is saying, the proposed law is saying, no, they will not have jurisdiction on everybody. In other words, there will be an exception. The exception here is, number one, the court shall have no jurisdiction over any person classified as a child or that was under the age of 18 when the alleged crime was committed. The court shall have jurisdiction over any person that was 18 years of age or older when the alleged crime was committed. And I think that is the significant piece of information you must know. So when the court is established, child soldiers are excluded. But if you were 18 and either you had a gun or committed any other crime, you held a gun and you killed somebody, or you carry on any other crime by torturing somebody, raping, or doing anything that is against any law, and you were 18, you did that, then you are now exempted. The court will have jurisdiction over you. In other words, the court will have the right and the powers to investigate you. And if the court will find or finds evidence that you did those things, yet the court will render a judgment. That is the War Crimes Court to be established, will render a judgment. Now, let's look at another thing that is important that the court, will look into. The issue of amnesty. And there are some people that believe that the Accra Peace Accord has granted amnesty to those who play major roles in the war, who are being accused of some violations, that these people are exempted from investigation, prosecution whatsoever. They have amnesty. They are being given a free pass, that no one should ask them questions for their role in the war. Is that the case? Now, the War Crime Code is answering that question. And here it is. The court shall not recognize any amnesty granted to a person falling within the jurisdiction of the TRC and the criminal jurisdiction, Article 11 to 14 of this statute. So you see, they are saying nobody will be granted amnesty. Nobody is free from investigation and prosecution. the court will not recognize any form of honesty that anybody is talking about from anywhere. In as much as you've been accused or it is alleged that you committed any crime, the court, when established, will investigate everybody except for those who were minor below the age of 18. Those are the only person who will not be investigated. But there will be no reason why an individual can say or will say the court will not investigate you because you have some form of honesty from anywhere. The court will not recognize any form of honesty. Any and everybody who is an adult will be investigated by the court when the court is established. Now, the court will have a prosecutor. The prosecutor shall be responsible for the investigation and prosecution of person referred to the court by the TRC in the final consolidated report. So if anybody mentioned in the TRC final report, the prosecutor, or in other words, the court through the prosecutor through the court will have the power to investigate any such person. That is another significant piece. Now, another thing we need to know is the presumption of innocence. Will the court be coming to say, oh, okay, this person, we saw the person during the war, they did this, so that person is guilty automatically? Is that how they're going to be? The court is saying no. The proposed court is saying no. There will be what they call the presumption of innocence. They will assume, they will act like you didn't do anything wrong. They don't know you to be guilty of anything until it is established based on evidence that you actually did what you're being accused of. So presumption of innocence will be given due recognition by the court when the court is established. It reads, a person shall be considered innocent of a crime until guilt has been established beyond a reasonable doubt, granting to all persons fundamental human rights as enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all other international human rights instruments of the United Nations, including those of the African Union, the Economic Communities of West African States, the Constitution of the Republic of Liberia, and other customary human rights instruments, etc., etc. So they are saying, look, we will use all of these laws, and we're not going to say this person is guilty because these laws say this person is guilty when they commit this, that, and this person have been accused to have committed this crime, so they are automatically guilty. No. As far as they know, until the evidence lead them to a decision that you actually did this, then you will be guilty of either one of these laws or all of these laws if you so did those things being accused of and the evidence supports the allegations. Now, another significant thing that we want you to know is the right to file an appeal. So say a person who has been accused went before the court gathered evidence, and the court make a decision that this person is guilty of this crime. And that person is saying, no, maybe you may have mistaken me for somebody. I have no role, or I did not do what you are accusing me of. Will that person have the right to appeal? The War Crimes Code, when established the way it's been crafted, is saying, yes, that person will have the right to appeal. So it reads, appeals of persons convicted by the trial chamber can be lodged with the appellate chamber on the following grounds. So there will be reason why you can appeal. One, substantial violation of criminal procedure regulations, meaning that the lawyers didn't follow the procedure in looking at the case. An error as to a question of law invalidating the decision. When there is a law, when there is an error in the trial, and that error violates any other law, then the decision or the verdict will be looked at as wrong, and so the person will have the right to appeal it. A substantial error of fact which has occasioned a miscarriage of justice, meaning whenever they have sufficient evidence that there was an error made, maybe mistaken identity, and this you can't mistaken me for someone who committed a crime, and then you go find the person guilty when the person did not actually do the crime or did not commit the crime. So when that happens, that is a miscarriage of justice. It must be reversed. So when an individual have reason to believe that the wrong person is being convicted, then of course they can also appeal, and that appeal will be verified and will be granted. And number 4, an error as to a question of law or fact invalidating the penalty of the sentence. In other words, they say this person is being accused to do this, and based on the gravity of the matter, this is the penalty. But now it has been established that the penalty given to that person is the wrong penalty for the crime the person is being found guilty of. When such thing comes to the knowledge of the individual being guilty, their lawyer can say no. When one steals, for example, the person spent a day in jail. This person did not steal and you put them in jail for a day. That is wrong. And so for that reason, that person needs to get out of jail right now, because that is not what you do when a person steals, for example. And so they are saying that there will be grounds to appeal any decision or judgment or verdict, or guilty verdict being brought down by the War Crimes Court against any individual. There will be reason, and here are the reasons they are giving. Another reason is the prosecutor may file an appeal either against or in favor of the accused. The prosecutor can do it. So many reasons, and I can't go to all because of time, other than to tell you there will be reasons. In other words, you can appeal any decision. Now, another major thing is inquiries or evidence. How do you gather evidence? The court shall consult the full records of the case presented by the prosecutor or other authorized representatives. And they went further by saying the court shall order the collection and production of evidence as necessary in the following areas: witnesses and witness protection mechanism, experts, government agency, non-governmental organization, corporation, international institution, documentation, including the full record to be provided by the prosecutor and other authorized representatives. So they are saying they will look at all other evidence. Whether they document, the evidence is a documentation from the government, whether from the corporation, maybe that Firestone that documents something that, oh, during the war, this person, we saw them and our camera picked the person up and they were taking this documentation, or we saw them carrying on this as maybe they were killing this person or they stole this because of War and Economics Crime Code, right? We saw this person. Yeah, our camera, yeah, our evidence, we documented everything. Those evidence will also be considered. So when it comes to making inquiries and gathering evidence, they will go everywhere. They will go to individuals, they will go to institutions. Those institutions might be cooperation, it can be government, it can be a non-governmental organization like NGO that were in Liberia during the war, that has information that can become meaningful or is a meaningful evidence. They will also use that. So you see, they are detailing everything that you need to know, concerning the structure of the court. Another thing is judgment. The judgment of the court shall be final and rendered by a majority judges of the trial chamber or appeal chamber. So they will have the power to come down with judgment and ruling. And they are saying a judgment must be a democratic process. All of the judges, they talk about 8 judges, all of the judges will meet, look at the evidence, and they will take a vote. And when they take a vote, when majority says yes, based on the evidence, this person is actually guilty of this, then they have a judgment. There will be no rush. Judgment will be based on the facts, on the evidence, and they will come up with a judgment. And like I said earlier, even after judgment, when an individual feels that they did not get a fair trial, mistaken identity, anything whatsoever, the rules are there on grounds where you can appeal. You can go and appeal that particular judgment. There will be room for that. Now, you might want to know penalties. So let's talk about penalty. The trial chamber shall impose criminal sanction on convicted person for a specified period. In imposing sentences, the trial chamber can consider the gravity of the offense, the age, the background, the circumstances of the convicted person. So they are saying, when you are found guilty, there will be a penalty. And for them to lever that penalty, they will look at the circumstances of the crime. They will look at the person's age. They will look at the gravity of the offense. And then they will decide that, well, this person will either go to court for 100 years, 50 years, 10 years, and that's how they will decide. Now, they also talk about the imposition of sanction, meaning that when they look at the judgment, they can decide that this person, because of the role you play, for example, you will not serve in government for the rest of your life because what you did was so heinous. So there will be sanctions that the court will put on individuals. Now, an example of sanction, at some point, I think there was a decision that those who play major role in the war should not have served for at least 30 years in government, but they went and changed that and did something, right? So a sanction is to restrict someone's right for a period of time. So they are saying, in the wisdom of the court, the War Crimes Court to be established, when established now, they will come up with sanction against individuals, after they should have been adjudicated and found guilty. They will decide whether, well, because of what you've done, you will not serve in government no more, or you shall not have the right to vote. They will come up with something, and the evidence, the circumstances, the age, and the gravity will lead them to that decision. So many things they list there when it comes to penalty. So the execution of judgment, what is that? The court has jurisdiction to enforce a judgment and hold in contempt any person or entity, including the government of Liberia, that obstructs its decision or processes or proceedings. So you see, they are saying, when talking about enforcement of judgment, when the court makes a decision, the War Crime Code, when established, is saying when it makes a decision, it will have the power to enforce that decision. In other words, when it finds someone's guilty, it will ensure that if it is jail term the person must serve, that person will serve that jail term. And if anybody attempt to obstruct the enforcement of that particular judgment, the court will come after you. Say, for example, I'm found guilty by the court. I'm supposed to be going to jail, or I'm to go to jail for 20 years. And then my big brother is the speaker, and he said, no, that my Peking there. So my man said down there, don't go to court. That court will be coming for that speaker to give reason why he is obstructing my imprisonment after a judgment has been made. They will have the power to do so. And it can be the Liberian government that try to obstruct the enforcement of a particular judgment. The court will come after the Liberian government, let alone any individual or an institution that may attempt to obstruct the execution of the judgment of the War Crimes Court. Another thing, the enforcement of sentence. Imprisonment shall be served in Liberia. Now, you might want to know, when somebody is found guilty, now where will they put the person in jail? The court is saying imprisonment shall be served in Liberia. In other words, when you are found guilty and you are to go to jail or be in prison, it will be in Liberia. If, however, the government of Liberia determines that for national security or capacity-related reasons, imprisonment shall be served in another jurisdiction or country, state, nothing in this statute will prohibit it from relying on or entering into an agreement for the enforcement of sentence with other states or institutions. I like that. Now, they are saying the primary place they will put people in jail when they are found guilty, the Liberia. However, the Liberian government may decide on national security grounds for other reasons. The court now can decide. Now, all right, instead of Liberia, we'll take the person to, for example, Ghana, or we'll take the person to the Hague, we'll take the person to the Netherlands. Example, a practical example like Charles Taylor. He was found guilty by the court in Sierra Leone, but they sent him to the United Kingdom to go to jail on security grounds. Liberia is closer to Sierra Leone. Taylor has a lot of people who stay, love him. They can rush to that place in the morning and bust that place open and cause trouble. So let's carry that man to the UK. On security ground, that decision was made. So they are saying anybody found guilty, the primary place will be in Liberia. But for security reasons, they will have the right, and no one can stop them, to negotiate with any country and seek an agreement to imprison that such person in any other country other than Liberia. That is what they are also saying. So, folks, this documentation in our possession is huge. The last thing I want to share with you before I take leave of you is publication of this law. You might want to know, Nana, well, this War Crimes Code proposed law that you people have in your possession, when everything is set, will we see it to read it? They are saying yes. Everybody will find a copy. It will become public document for all of you to read and know all of the different steps, the powers, the limitation, what they can do, what they can't do, who, what will be doing this, the structure, the procedures, everything. You will have first hand on this particular document. And they make it a law too to make it public. And yeah, it is. This law, after enactment, shall be published without delay in at least 3 newspapers in the Republic of Liberia. This law shall enter into force immediately after its signing into law, bearing the effective date thereon, and shall be published accordingly, in keeping with the laws of the Republic of Liberia. Any law to the contrary notwithstanding. They also say, when this law shall have finally been enacted into law, and the president affixes his signature, and it becomes law, it will be binding on the Liberian government to publish it for people to see it. And they are saying, the day it shall be signed into law, it is that very day it will become law and binding on any and everybody in Liberia and on Liberia. Folks, I want to say thank you for taking up your time to listen to the presentation. I brought you a breaking news, War Crimes Court Establishment document leak. And I have been able to summarize in a very concise fashion the powers of the court, the proposed War Crimes Code now, the structures, the jurisdiction, the sentencing powers, and everything. And if you are just joining and you meet the presentation in the middle of it, you can take your time after this broadcast ends to go back to it and listen to the presentation. You can also share the presentation with any other person who might have missed the presentation. This presentation shows leaked documentation in our possession that detail the steps leading to the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court and the powers, the function, the structures of the court and how the court will be operational. This video, this presentation gives you all of that. On that note, we want to say thank you, and thank you always for following Focus on Liberia. We are always about educating, elevating, and promoting all things Liberia. We will now close our broadcast with the song that says, "We are all Liberians." Enjoy the song, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our